Now we're going to
Yes.
turn it over to Brenda Scott Henry, who, Brenda, let me get your title right, is the Director from the City of Gary Department of Environmental and Green Urbanism. And Brenda is going to tell us about the programs in Gary, Indiana. All right, Brenda, you're still muted. Ah, there you are.
Good morning. Can you see my screen yet?
We can see your screen, so just put it in presentation mode and you should be good.
Okay. All right.
All right, looks great. Thank you so much.
So I didn't have the right link to join the webinar, but I used the one that Tony tested with me. So I still get this polling thing popping up on my screen. And I know it's not for me, it's Tony's screen.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so thank you for this opportunity to share with you today some of the things that we're doing in the city of Gary with our green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure strategies. And I just must say that this has been a part of our efforts now for about for over 8 years now to revitalize our city by using lots of planning efforts. So you'll hear me today talk about this team approach, or really engaging approach to solving some of the issues that we are faced in the city of Gary. So a little bit about us. We're located on the most southern shores of Lake Michigan. So this is a picture of standing on the beach and looking out. Our mayor, Mayor Jerome Prince, is really focused this year on reimagining Gary and how we can do things a little bit different in terms of developing our corridors, engaging green corridors, engaging citizens, and using data in order to make decisions about how we move forward. And a little bit about Gary. We are a legacy city with a population of over 75,000 people, 50,000 square miles. As you can see, that's pretty huge for limited resources that we have. But there are 12 neighborhoods within the city of Gary, and we have an abundance of natural resources, just purely a beautiful place to explore nature. We are really connected in terms of transit. As you can see, Crossroads of America for Indiana is really true for us. As you can see, this picture, this map depicts all of the roads that we have coming through. I-90, I-94, I-80, I-65, 12 and 20. So you can definitely, you find yourself traveling. We are a transportation corridor. We have over 50 parks in the city of Gary, and we are reassessing those to determine how we can maybe repurpose some of the parks that are underutilized using green infrastructure. And we have 3 major water bodies in the city of Gary. One, the Grand Calumet River, which is located on the, if you're looking at this map up north at the top of the map, we have the Little Calumet River, which you will see that runs right along I-90. And of course, we have Lake Michigan. So here's another picture from Marquette Beach. And if you can see far in the distance, there's the Chicago skyline. So we are only about 25, 30 minutes from Chicago. You can get there very quickly. But we are also a part of this, of course, the Chicago metropolitan area. So I've been with the city in this role as a director for about 8 years, over 8 years. And when we started out doing a lot of our planning efforts, we we did a lot of planning, so an assessment and evaluating and talking to residents about what are the challenges we face. And for me, I just pulled out a few of them as it relates to the environment. And so there are substantial climate impacts that we're having with air, land, and water. But we're really focused on right now water quality because of the high groundwater table and also the increased number of wet weather events that we have, which results in combined overflows, combined sewer overflows, urban runoff, we're degradation of our water bodies, toxic air pollution, divestment in neighborhoods. Citizens had just practically given up on government to even make a difference. So we had to, we were faced with that challenge. And then we have outdated land use policy and land use planning efforts. It's just, it's at a minimum. We see these in a team approach. We see these challenges as opportunities for us to rebuild our community. And we do that neighborhood by neighborhood. So we have the master comprehensive plan was just updated in 2020. And I'll talk about that, some of the plans that we have later on in my presentation. But we've done a lot of neighborhood scale planning in communities like Emerson, Miller, Etna, Glen Park, downtown Gary, and our Brunswick communities. So we are beginning to assess to see what the needs are, and then having citizens really engage, drive in the processes actually, in order to give us some directions on how to move forward. So with the next bullet, public engagement, civic engagement is critical for us. Some of the things that we've implemented, we know that this is an opportunity for us to have a more green economy, given the challenges that we have, but it is imperative that we train a workforce to be ready for these opportunities that the city is launching, particularly with us having to implement the long-term control plan for CSOs. And then with all of the many partners we have, like the Center for Neighborhood Technology, Delta Institute, University of Michigan, Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative, the National League of Cities. We have, most importantly, the EPA, who's used us, helped us out a lot in terms of developing technical tools and resources so that we can do the work of green infrastructure. And ultimately, we want to improve the environment and public health for all citizens to enjoy, thereby improving the quality of life for our citizens in Gary and our visitors. Some of the community-driven planning efforts that we have and some of the projects include this year, we're beginning to work on our Stormwater Master Plan. This is not by accident. The Clean Water Act is changing, has been updated. We're waiting on the state to implement what is required of our new permit cycle for our municipal separate storm sewer program we call MS4. So we have to, with the next permit cycle, we will be required to do a stormwater master plan on how we will manage and identify best management practices that we will implement citywide. The Little Calumet Watershed Plan was completed in 2008. We're working with a group now to see if we can update that. There's a Greenlink Master Plan that we've completed. It's an intermodal trail that connects, I think I showed you the slide prior to, that connects the Little Calumet River, the Grand Calumet River, and Lake Michigan. And then we've focused on local food, local places. We have an action plan that we completed in 2016. And just last year, we completed our green infrastructure land use plan. Now, there's a difference in land use planning and actually identifying, doing a green infrastructure stormwater management plan. Those are two different things. The land use plan is identifying areas where we have land that will be best suited for stormwater management. And then our master plan is how we implement those projects citywide. Some of our demonstration projects that you may or may not have heard about is our Vacant to Vibrant. This is in partnership with the Cleveland Botanical Garden. We work with them, Cleveland, Gary, Indiana, and Buffalo, New York, to do these demonstration projects. We call them stormwater parks located within neighborhoods. We also have a demonstration project at City Hall, on the lawns of City Hall, called Greater Green, where we demolished a building, a 14-story building, and repurposed it with a green space. We work with doing climate resilient tools. We have a project in the pipeline. We hope to complete our climate action plan this year. We have done a lot of focusing on readying the workforce. So we have this urban conservation team who is responsible for managing all the green infrastructure installations that we have throughout the city. And we're looking at developing a long-term training program where we can start with our youth at an early age to train them on doing green jobs. And most importantly, in terms of how we do water quality monitoring for our stormwater, which will probably be another requirement in the new permitting cycle, is we're working with the USGS to monitor the quality and the quantity of stormwater at one of our parks, one of our green infrastructure site. And I'll show you the video while you're doing your polling at the end of this presentation. I'm out of time. So this is, I already talked a little bit about the increased weather events that we're having around the Great Lakes, but more importantly, I'm finding that as we're doing the construction reviews on our, for projects that are happening in the city as it relates to stormwater, we use the 100-year flood to evaluate projects' capability of managing stormwater. But with increased wet weather events, we're realizing that we may have to do something a little differently locally here. I don't know if we can be more stringent, but it's an opportunity that we may need to plan for 200 flood events because the 100 flood events are just too frequent in our community. So it's making it really hard for our sewer district to manage all of this stormwater, which they're not required to, they're not supposed to. So with when I mentioned the green infrastructure plan that we completed last year, there were elements to it. This will demonstrate how we do our planning efforts, this particular slide. So one of the first things we did, we received funding from the Lake Michigan Coastal Program. We worked with the redevelopment department, the planning department, environmental, my department, and we solicit broadly partners, stakeholders who could work with us in developing this plan. So we had advisory groups who would facilitate components of the planning efforts. And then we have held many community meetings, and most importantly, the surveying or talking to people at every chance we got. We would use it as every public venue, we use it as an opportunity to get feedback from the citizens. We knew that data and information would be critical in terms of planning efforts or even doing some implementation of the plan. So we have we've completed a parcel survey of every parcel in the city of Gary. And we use that as a basis to build layers of data that we will need in order to make decisions about prioritizing green infrastructure projects. So we have this mapping tool, and I'll show you some slides once in following this particular slide. And I can't see this last thing here. Oh, and then another component of this planning process was to do a policy scan of our existing stormwater ordinance and our land use and zoning ordinances. And we've demonstrated that we've taken some of that information and actually put it into place. So I'm very excited about that. There's some more to see. So here are some other slides that I'm sharing with you that includes, here's the Green Link corridor and how this link it goes through several neighborhoods throughout the city. And then you will see here in the little diagonal lines where these are really focused areas where we have great opportunity to expand upon conservation work. So Brunswick neighborhood, the Miller neighborhood, and I would also add in here at the bottom of the screen where you see this little red loop trail, that's also a focus area because that's where Indiana University Northwest is located, and Gleason Park. Something's going on here. We use green infrastructure also as a way to stabilize neighborhoods. The city of Gary has a high level of vacant properties. A prime example is as a result of the housing crash, housing crisis, rather, we were left with many vacant and abandoned homes. And so we've been doing an aggressive demolition program. Not so proud to say that, but that's what's necessary in order for us to figure out ways to repurpose and revitalize the community. So we are creating, so there's a blight elimination strategy. We're using these vacant lots as opportunity to create stormwater parks where it's feasible. When we put these stormwater parks in place, it also is driven by block clubs or neighborhood groups who are interested in eliminating blight in their community, and their preference like something, a natural park as opposed to having something recreational. So because that is acceptable, is helping us how to repurpose some of this land that we have. And it's also an opportunity for us to, that job creation piece there. So there's a lot of industry in the city of Gary. As I mentioned, we will establish, we were founded by U.S. Steel, who became the Gary Land Company, who then allowed us to grow into the community that we are. So industry is heavy along the Lake Michigan corridor. So U.S. Steel, we have the casinos that are located there. We have other manufacturing, like a Carmoose who manufacture lime. They're located along the Lake Michigan corridor there. More inland, we're also plagued by landfills, Superfund sites, and those type of brownfields or hazardous properties in our community. So we're looking at ways in which we can repurpose those, that land as well to do development. And we have something very interesting coming through the pipeline for Lake Sandy Joe that I'm not privy to talk about today. This is an example of how you can layer many things, put many layers on here. So stabilize neighborhoods, the green link, and you'll see the industrial corridors or the conservation corridors. And by overlaying this, it helps us to better identify areas where we can focus our greening efforts, creating these green buffers, particularly around the lakes. So here, this just, we use this as a way to prioritize projects that we will work on. I think I've said that a couple of times too, but this slide really depicts that by, there are about 80 something, 90 something sites have been identified, and they are either completed projects or they're proposed green infrastructure projects in the works. Resources. I mentioned that we have the Gary Counts tool, and these slides will be available for you to just kind of tap into these websites. The CRIS model that we're using to as a climate adaptation tool that we're using to prioritize green infrastructure. I mentioned Vacant to Vibrant. We work with EPA to create a green infrastructure, a stormwater management community engagement framework for guiding our efforts in doing, assessing the public needs. And then we have that, the USGS as something I'll share with you in just a second. So if I'm good on time, I'm ready to go to the slides, but while they're doing the polling questions, I'll go to my, to the time-lapse video and then have a couple of minutes for presentations.
That sounds good. You're good on time, Jane. Or, I'm sorry, Brenda.
Okay, great. So let me go to this. This is exciting here. This is actually, it's real-time camera on site so that we can monitor what's going on with the City Hall Rain Garden project. And so we often find USGS out there repairing some of the stormwater monitoring equipment or the wells and collecting samples and all types of things. But
and Brenda, I think you might need to share a different version of your screen. We still see the presentation slides, so you might need to share one of your monitors. Ah, there we go.
Okay, so
perfect. Thank you.
Questions. Okay, I'm ready for questions if there are any questions.
All right, we're getting lots of good job, great explanation. Love to see Gary revitalize. So one question that's come in is how is the community embracing this effort? Are they excited to see what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. We, as I mentioned in the beginning, one of the projects that we had was called Vacant to Vibrant. We went into the Etna community to hold community meetings and we weren't getting any participation. So we decided to start knocking on doors and people would come see us come in and they would go back in the house and they would wait until we leave and jump in the car and drive off. And so we had to figure out, like, we were very persistent in getting some participation. So we connected with the precinct committee person. So it's important to know people. Very important to know people. Connected with the precinct committee person, the council person, and they started reaching out to people to get them to the meetings. And then we did another canvassing of the neighborhood where we were able to talk to people and they began to start coming out and talking to us. One of the things that we found at the end of doing those stormwater parks is that they wish that they had done more in the parks because they came out as beautiful sites. So if you Google Gary Vacant to Vibrant, you'll see some of the locations where the 3 locations that we did the projects at. And, but it was really interesting to see how they had gone from passive design to more interactive design that they wanted at the sites. We do not have to do much maintenance on those sites because the citizens have adopted them and they are taking care of them.
That is excellent. That is a testimony to the work you guys have done. Yeah. That is fantastic.